going on, guys? Welcome back to United View. Hope everyone is doing very well. And of course, it's match day. It's game day. Bayern Munich versus Manchester United. Match day 1 of the Champions League this evening. But before we get into any of that, we've got a bit of news to talk about. And it's actually come from a surprising source, one Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, who has for the first time spoken about Manchester United, about all things Manchester United, speaking for the first time since his Manchester United departure, since he was sacked, fired, terminated, whatever you want to call it, in late 2021, and some interesting things to say about a variety of topics regarding his United tenure, his relationship with the Glazers, transfers that did and didn't work, his best and worst moments, things missing from his time as United manager, the transfer apology at United, signing Cristiano Ronaldo and how that was a great opportunity but it may have been a mistake. He's also spoken about speaking with Ralf Rangnick prior to Rangnick becoming the interim manager, people shying away from being the captain. There's just so much to get into that it warrants a bit of discussion, and let me know your thoughts about all of it in the comment section below, because certainly a lot of people are talking about this today, and it certainly is curious. Before I get into the quotes and the things that he said, I think back to his sort of exit interview that he did when Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was fired. They kind of played it out as if it was a mutual understanding. They were mutually going to part ways, consciously uncoupling or whatever. And he did an interview in-house with the Manchester United media, MUTV. And in it, he said, look, I'm going away. I'm not going to do any interviews, so you don't have to worry about that. Well, that was then, and this is now, because Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is doing interviews. He has done an interview and has spoken for the first time. Now, why is that the case? It could be a variety of reasons. It could just be that he got a really good offer. It could be that he was maybe subject to an NDA or something like that has since expired. I don't know. But for the first time, Solskjaer has spoken, and certain things are damning, certain things are head-scratching, certain things are just bizarre. So I think it's worth getting into. Let's get straight into the quotes about what Solskjaer had to say, because as I mentioned, there's a lot that, that he had to say involved in all of this. So on who was his best signings at the club, he said, quote, Bruno Fernandes came straight in and lifted the team. Harry Maguire, it's a disgrace that he's getting so much abuse. I feel sorry for him, but he's a strong lad, and I hope it turns for him. He raised our defence big time when he arrived and lifted the mood around the place. I can't remember every signing I made, but I should, because there was a cap on 3 main ones every season. So that's really the first real bit of news there, that he was capped to 3 main signings per season. He continued by, when asked about this cap, who put it on, things like that, he said, I signed up for it when I arrived. I understood my remit and I agreed to it. I can't complain now, and I'm not the type to moan after losing my job, but Manchester United have spent a lot more in the 2 summer transfers since I was there. So it's one of those ones where you go, I'm not going to complain, but I'm going to complain anyway, which is what he's doing there. As for the cap, I mean, that was pretty obvious. That's pretty evident in his time there. You saw that the 3 signing agreement was there. I mean, obviously, man, if the Glazers and the ownership can penny pinch, that's exactly what they're going to do. And the problem is with the Solskjaer tenure and era is that, and this is the thing that I'm kind of glad that Solskjaer has spoken about this, because I think it serves as a reminder, and I think people have forgotten certain aspects of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's tenure, because I've seen this over the last few days. I've seen a lot of revisionist history regarding his time at Manchester United, and a lot of people that were critics suddenly aren't critics anymore and are wishing for those days back, and you sort of go, oh, what? Because part of the problem when Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was the Manchester United manager is this was a guy that realistically had no business being in that job. He's a guy that had been at Cardiff and he'd been at Molde, he'd done well in Norway, not done very well in England in a managerial capacity. Came in as an interim manager when Jose left, primarily just to lift the spirits, really, because he's a likeable guy and people get on with him and he's a legend of the club. And that's what it was really all about, morale boosting. And obviously when the results went well, and there were some fantastic results, you can't argue against that, but when the results went well, United gave him the job, but this was a guy that this was the dream job. It cannot get any better for him than this. And whatever circumstances or stipulations the Glazers could put in there, of course he was always going to accept it. He said, I signed up for it when I arrived. So they saw a guy, and this was always the thing that people pointed out, that all of the madness and, awfulness that goes on above him of people that really don't care about the footballing side of things. All they care about is money, commercial opportunities, etc., etc. Ollie was going to take it. He was going to take it because guess what? I know that realistically I probably shouldn't be here. I'm really not good enough as a coach, as a manager to be here. I'll take anything. And that's part of the problem. So it's difficult for me, to when I read what he says there, and he says that, well, when I was there, I was limited to 3 signings per summer. But then he also says in the next breath, but I signed up to it. Because again, he was desperate to have that job because he never thought he would get that job. Never, ever, ever. So, yes, does it shine a light on the transfer policy that's poor at United? Of course it does. But at the same time, it's sort of like, well, that's the situation that we were in. We had a manager that was willing to take it. We had a manager that was perfectly happy with ownership taking advantage of him because he was happy to be there. That's not a recipe for success at all. And I'm not putting the blame on Solskjaer there. I'm putting the blame on both of them. Because eventually you have to stand up and say enough's enough, I've got to walk. But he never was going to do that. And the ownership, they were always going to take advantage of someone that was happy to be there. Now, what's quite interesting as well is when he's talking about the players and the actual, I guess, the relationship he's had with some of the players and actually some of the players' egos and attitudes. He said, quote, "Some weren't as good as their own perception of themselves. I won't name names, but I was very disappointed when a couple turned down the chance to be captain. I was also disappointed when others said they wouldn't play or train because they wanted to force their way out." He says there was stuff in the media after I left about how I treated some players, which were complete lies, but I had a solid, honest relationship with most of them. So, I mean, to be honest, the first part there, where he's talking about how certain players turned down the chance to be captain, I think that's frankly shameful. Obviously there might be certain circumstances that might dictate that, whereby if I'm a player at a club and I'm just sort of first through the door and there's a player that's been there for a while, experienced, knows the club, plays week in, week out, and the manager goes, "I want to make you the captain," I could maybe say, I think the dressing room would be better if it goes to this person. A bit like when you get a job promotion, right? We want to offer you the job. I don't know. Maybe I think it might go to that person. But ultimately, look, if the manager says you want to be the captain, you just say yeah. You just say yeah. And the fact that, and that's a specific circumstance I'm saying about that. If some people didn't want it just because they didn't want to have the pressure or the limelight, then why on earth are you at Manchester United? You shouldn't even be at the club if you want to turn down the opportunity to be captain. When he's also talking about players saying that they wouldn't play or train because they wanted to force their way out, obviously, it's shocking, it's poor, it lacks character. At the same time, in modern football, is it surprising? Absolutely not. Solskjaer went on later on in the interview to say the same thing, that unfortunately this is part of I think he called it the disease of modern football. And he's right, that players, they have agents, family members, friends, the media all in their ears and are saying all these certain things, and that doesn't make a cohesive and positive environment when that's going on as well. It doesn't at all. Now, as for the stuff in the media about how he treated some players and he's saying are complete lies, look, I mean, when it comes to, it's a famous video here on United. It's one of the first ones, actually, and of KG talking about Ollie's lies and stuff like that in the media. And it is true because, there was Jesse Lingard's got a massive part to play, never played. All of those players, right? Ollie was, the Henderson thing and David De Gea. So I think some of the stuff that was written about him was true. Obviously, some people have sour grapes and are bitter. So some of the things that were said about him probably are not true as well. And look, he did have a good relationship. It's not to say, and this is what I always say about all of this stuff as well. It pertains to Ten Hag too at the moment. Not everything's black and white. There would be people that didn't like Ole Gunnar Solskjaer there, and people that didn't think he was good enough, and people that weren't happy with his man management or his tactics or what have you. But at the same time, I'm sure there are players at Manchester United that had a fantastic relationship with him. Obviously, one being Harry Maguire, another being Bruno Fernandes. We saw it with Ollie's last game, the Watford game, where he's applauding to the crowd, and I think some of the fans are booing him or what have you. And Bruno Fernandes goes up there. It's quite a stunning moment and starts shouting at the fans, going, "Don't boo him, this is on us, this is not on him, it's on us." So clearly there were people that had a fantastic relationship with him there, but to say that everything that's been read about him would be lies, maybe that's a bit of a stretch. Now, Solskjaer was asked about his successor, permanently anyway, Erik ten Hag, and he said, quote, "I know what he's going through, it's a dream job, but it's difficult. You're dealing with humans with all their problems and backgrounds. This isn't a computer simulation, but most are good professionals who want to do well. Some think about number one first. Most think of the club." And again, when he says that, it kind of, to me, I kind of touched on it before, where he's saying that it's a dream job, but it's difficult. And that was, I think that's the crux of a lot of Ollie's time there, is that he was a guy that was happy to be there, regardless of everything that was going on. And eventually, that kind of has to stop. If you're not comfortable, you're not happy with what's going on above you, you have to eventually sort of take a stand, or you have to try and force your own way, get your own way, stuff like that. Now, particularly when it comes to transfers and things of that nature, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was asked about the ownership, the Glazers, and he said, in my conversations with them, they were honest and upfront. I had to be patient and mentally strong, and I was. And they've backed the manager now. So, interesting what he says there, because he says with those owners, he doesn't outright come out and say they're terrible, they're awful, they make life difficult. But if you read between the lines, that's essentially what he's saying there. He's saying with them, you have to be patient and mentally strong, because it's not easy. They don't make it easy for you. They don't give you what you want. And look, life in football, and it's not about getting what you want all the time, but you want to be given the best tools possible to succeed. That doesn't happen at Manchester United with this ownership, unfortunately. And you do have to be patient. You do have to be mentally strong, because they make it difficult. As he mentions, it's a dream job, and they make it tough. They make it challenging. Not just because of results on the pitch, but a lot of the stuff that's happening off of it as well. And when he says at the end, and they've backed the manager now, he's kind of implying that he himself was not backed. We'll circle back to that, because I do want to have a bigger conversation about transfers and all that kind of stuff as well. He also talked about how when fans showed up at the training ground to protest against the Glazers, he talked about security not wanting him to talk to him, but he didn't care. He was going to talk to him and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's not a problem or anything like that. And he said that they always try to have him have security around him, and he didn't really care for it or anything like that. As far as the criticism and things of that nature, he was asked if he's been back to Manchester or Old Trafford really since, or just about the criticism, all that kind of stuff. He said, I've not been back much since. The whole family moved to Norway last year. People give me the thumbs up in Manchester, though they're more likely to do that in real life. It's easier to say you're shit when you're anonymous behind a keyboard, which is true. It is true. And that's something that I always say, not just about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, but about a lot of players. Well, I've said this about Maguire, or I've said this about Rashford, or Bruno Fernandes, all that kind of stuff. For me, criticism, and look, no one's perfect, but I like to try and think that I try my very best to, if I'll critique someone here, it would be what I would say to their face. And a lot of the stuff you see online, people wouldn't. They just wouldn't. And then it's funny, because you then get in the comments, I absolutely would say to Harry Maguire's face, you're a big square head, this, that, and the other. And you go, but you wouldn't though. You wouldn't. You've got to be. And Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is right about what he's saying about that as well. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer spoke about his final game as well, saying, quote, apart from Watford away, I can't remember any negativity at games, bar the odd comment. At Watford, I went to the away end after and remember thinking, I really don't have the backing of all of them. Bruno was there too, but I knew I was finished. And, yeah, you knew he was finished. I mean, to be honest, and this is when I get back to sort of revisionist history and people sort of changing what happened. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was a dead man walking for a while. And it felt like, and it was a symptom of Ole's tenure there as well. Just when you thought he was on the edge, he'd win a couple of games and he'd get it back. And towards the end there, he wasn't doing that. Whether it was Watford away, which was the last one, but even, I remember going into the game, I think it was Spurs away, and we won 3-0. What did they call it? El Sakiko or something like that, with Nuno at Spurs. But even going into that, everyone knew. You watched that season, even like the Champions League and the comebacks. And I remember going on some of these things and thinking that when you beat Villarreal the way we beat Villarreal, and the Atalanta come back, and it's great. And it's great coming back and all that kind of stuff. But eventually it comes to a point where it's not sustainable. And it was very quickly becoming not sustainable. And he says he knew after Watford he was finished. I think quite a few people knew probably before that indeed he was done. Now, Jadon Sancho has been in the headlines a lot recently because of his falling out with Erik ten Hag. And this is a head-scratching comment from Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, it must be said. So Solskjaer, when asked if he wanted Jadon Sancho, he said, quote, yes, I wanted to sign him. Manchester United will never sign a player the manager doesn't want. That's not the case everywhere. Jadon was put up there as the number one target for the right wing by the scouts. When you look at his talent, I could see why. He then carried on by saying, unfortunately, it's not worked out. When he arrived, he had to go to hospital and there was a setback because he couldn't start the first few games. He's immensely talented and we haven't seen the best of him. I hope we do, but he prefers to play on the left wing where Marcus plays. Now, when I saw that last comment, I went, wait a minute. So first of all, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer acknowledges Jadon Sancho prefers to play on the left, but he signed him for the right wing. Red flag involved in that part. 2, the way he lays that out, is he says, I will say it again, Jadon was put up as the number 1 target for the right wing by the recruitment department, right? So I'm looking at this, and we can go in and actually wider to sort of the wider transfer issues, right, at Manchester United, the wider transfer issues, because he's talking about that, and it's probably a good segue involved in all of this, okay? And he does go into the players that he wanted later on as well, but it's probably the right time to say this too. So you've then got him saying Jadon Sancho was put up as the number 1 target for the right-hand side by the scouts, recruitment department. He goes on to name other players that he wanted, that he had discussions about. Erling Haaland, Jude Bellingham, Harry Kane, Declan Rice, Moises Caicedo. You can go into the Ralf Rangnick list of players. He recommended basically everyone, but we can go into them. Gvardiol, Šeško, Luis Diaz, Nkunku, Lema, Vlahovic, Alvarez, Enzo Fernandez, Caicedo once again. People that Erik ten Hag have wanted during his tenure that he hasn't got. Cody Gakpo, Kim Min-jae, Harry Kane. Louis van Gaal, he said famously, United gave me 6th and 7th choice targets. Right? So you've got all of that going on. It's firmly established the recruitment department at Manchester United is not up to snuff. It is awful. It is terrible. They do not get first choice targets for the managers. And yet this week, there has been an attempt at criticism of Erik ten Hag trying to overhaul that process and saying, you guys don't know what you're doing. You won't get me the targets. I'm going to take control of this. I'm going to take charge of this. And some people have criticised him for that. Some people have criticised him saying, oh, why is Erik getting too involved in transfers? I can't believe Erik's getting involved in transfers. It's terrible. Shady business going on. Oh, let the recruitment department do what they're meant to do. Are you effing kidding me? And that is why when I go back to revisionist history, because that whole bit that I've been talking about, the players that we've missed out on, the players that the managers wanted, that's common knowledge. Everyone knows we've missed out on players. Everyone knows. We haven't got the managerial first targets for ages. Same with Jose when he was there too. He missed out on a ton of players that he wanted. So don't start going on about, it's Ten Hag's fault or anything like that, because clearly it's not. It's the recruitment department, and also every transfer is signed off by the Glazers, by Joel Glazer. The story's out there this week about Joel Glazer vetoing transfers or anything like that. So you have to sympathise for the managers involved in this. Now, I would say, with the Solskjaer bit, when he was put up there as number 1 target for the right wing, and I understood why, I see his talent. Did nobody mention, but he prefers to play on the left? We've already got someone on the left. Did nobody mention that? It felt like it just dawned on them when they came in. That's a problem. And the manager's culpable involved in that. If he's part of that process, it must be said. Because he said number 1 target, and I wanted him. Now, as far as this managerial cycle at Manchester United, Solskjaer said, quote, let's hope Erik is successful, and if there is a cycle, he breaks it, someone is going to do it. I hope so, that someone is going to do it. I really, really do. I mentioned he spoke about players that he was interested in, spoke about the likes of Jude Bellingham, spoke about Harry Kane as well, that Solskjaer was interested in. Of course, again, it's a lot, you know. He said players that he was closest joining Manchester United, he said, Erling Haaland, before he made his Salzburg debut. Declan Rice, who wouldn't have cost what he did in the summer. We discussed Moises Caicedo, but we felt we needed players ready. He sort of suggested that the reason they didn't go for Caicedo was more because at Brighton you get a year or two to develop. You don't really get that at Manchester United, which I even felt like that is a weak excuse. That's a lame excuse when you sign Dan James. You know, we've done literally during his time there, when you signed Ahmad, when you signed Facundo Pellistri, 3 players who clearly were not ready for prime time when they came in. And the reason you didn't sign Caicedo is because, we felt like we need players that were ready. Come on, man. That's not an excuse. The Erling Haaland one, to me, will always be bizarre how United didn't pull that off, considering the relationship, considering, you know, the fact that he was up Mulder. It just was there. It was natural. I mean, to me now, Don't understand how that one didn't happen. I guess that goes to show, again, the incompetence. He also spoke about bringing in Cristiano Ronaldo. He said, quote, bringing Cristiano Ronaldo back was a decision that was difficult to turn down, and I felt we had to take it, but it turned out wrong. It felt so right when he signed, and the fans at that Newcastle game when Old Trafford was rocking, he said. And look, I think there's no way of looking at it apart from it did turn out wrong. It didn't. It didn't work out. Cristiano Ronaldo coming back did not work out. Now, I've seen some people say, yeah, but he scored all the goals that season at Manchester United. Yeah, but that season United finished 6th. And Ole Gunnar Solskjaer got sacked. So clearly, it didn't work out. I think people are kind of missing the point when it comes to that one, frankly, because I've seen people try to sort of still defend the signing, which again clearly did not work out whatsoever. He also said, "I would have signed Harry Kane every day of the week." And my understanding that he wanted to come to United, but the club didn't have the budget with financial constraints from COVID. There was no bottomless pit. Now, I'm not sure from what time he's talking about. Perhaps he's referring to the season where Harry Kane nearly went to Man City, which again is 2021, around the time of the Ronaldo signing in his last season. And I look back on that, and again, it's important to add context to these things. I don't know how feasible that would have been during that period of time because, I mean, didn't City have over £100 million turned down by Spurs that year? Because he had several years left on his contract. So realistically, Spurs, I don't know if Daniel Levy would have ever sold him to another English club. I just don't know if he would have done that, particularly with time left on his deal. So I don't know how much look, obviously who wouldn't want him, but I sort of looked at that one and thought, that's quite interesting. And he also spoke about Jude Bellingham, saying, we wanted Jude Bellingham at Manchester United badly. He was one of my top targets at the club. Jude chose Dortmund, and I respect that. And look, when it comes to that one too, United, by all accounts, did everything they could to sign Jude Bellingham. It's kind of famous at this point, isn't it, of showing him around Carrington, meeting with Sir Alex and all that kind of stuff. Ultimately, and this is the sad thing about Manchester United, is that ultimately that was the right move for Jude Bellingham to not go to Man United. Because would he have played every week like he did at Dortmund? Probably not. Would he have developed like he did at Borussia Dortmund? Probably not. I mean, look, Jude Bellingham's generational talent. I mean, who knows? I mean, there are some people that just, despite the adversity, they will always thrive and shine. And, it's a game of hypothetical. We don't know. But the fact that he's at Real Madrid right now, he's still, 20? He can win. I think he will win the Ballon d'Or at some point in his career. He could go down as one of the greatest, if not the greatest English player ever, which I know is such a big statement to make because we've had some great ones. But I mean, the guy is just a phenomenon. I really do think so, especially at this age. He could play for 15 plus more years at the highest level. And where he is right now represents that it was the right move not to come to United. And would we, with our track record in recent history, forget like the 90s, but in recent history, post-Ferguson, the last decade, are we the right place to go for a talent that big and manage that effectively? I don't know. So you get the impression that maybe you made the right choice. But look, lots of comments, very explosive. Let me know your thoughts on the interview. Let me know your thoughts on all of those different things he said, whether it's about signings, transfer policy, Ronaldo, Bellingham, Haaland, missing out. He said the only thing missing out on his tenure was a trophy, of course, the Europa League, a penalty away and all that kind of stuff. Let me know your thoughts about all of it in the comment section below. Really interested to know what you guys have to say about it. Of course, coming later today, it's match days. We're going to have a match view. We're going to have the full-time view, fan views. All that kind of stuff is on the way, so be sure to subscribe. Bottom right-hand corner. Tune in, and you never know, something else might happen today. I'm out of here. Have a good one. Peace.